If you're watching this time yesterday here on France 24, we had the dramatic latest from Barclays. Today, it's going to be another day to remember, really, for UK banking. Bob Diamond quit as Barclays CEO yesterday. He's going to in front of Parliament today after going public with some potentially explosive revelations, Owen.
I think it's fair to say, Stuart, that normally a UK Treasury Select Committee is not exactly prime-time viewing or
will be today.
A must-see. It will be today, absolutely. The question being asked by parliamentarians and indeed the wider UK banking industry is who knew what and when. This is, of course, in reference to Bob Diamond, who stepped down as Barclays CEO and just hours later published what could be a fairly damning document over the rate rigging scandal that has cost Barclays some £300 million in fines. The documents published by the UK bank raised questions over just how much the Bank of England knew about one of the biggest scandals to rock the industry. William Hildebrandt has the story for us.
Disgraced and virtually leaderless, Barclays is losing its chairman, while both its chief executive and chief operating officer have quit over one of the biggest scandals to engulf British banking. Barclays rigged the official interbank lending rate known as LIBOR that sets the price for a vast range of mortgages and other credit derivatives. And now Barclays has dragged the Bank of England into the mire. It's published a memo from ex-Barclays CEO Bob Diamond that suggests the BOE's deputy governor were lowering the LIBOR rate at the height of the 2008 financial crisis to suggest their creditworthiness was healthier than it was. In fact, banks like Barclays were loaded with toxic subprime mortgages that presented a significant credit risk. Analysts say it's an explosive revelation.
It's an absolutely staggering memo, isn't it? I mean, here you have the head of a large bank saying that the Bank of England, I'm not quite saying, but certainly dropping a very strong hint that the bank ought to be fiddling its numbers.
The Bank of England denies any wrongdoing. Barclays has paid $300 million in fines, though the latest revelations suggest other banks were rigging LIBOR before it joined in. But the fallout has been hugely damaging.
It's a reputational thing. If we go back 4 years ago to the subprime crisis, that did much more financial damage than this LIBOR scandal has done. But the LIBOR scandal just looks like out-and-out fraud. So I think it's the reputational risk to all of these banks.
With the bank almost leaderless, former chairman Marcus Agius will stay on as acting CEO. Diamond will testify before the British Parliament today in a scandal that's left the walls of Barclays and is threatening to reach Whitehall itself.
Yeah, and that select committee hearing will kick off at around about 3 p.m. Paris time. We'll, of course, follow that. But let's get some more on this from Charlie Parker. He's the director of Citywire Wealth Management in Citywire Wealth Manager, even in London. Charlie, good morning to you. I did get your title right at last. This scandal surrounding Barclays is deepening very quickly, and the inference from that memo that we've just been hearing about is that at best, the Bank of England must have known that banks at some point were going to rig LIBOR during the height of the financial crisis in 2008. That's a pretty serious allegation.
Yeah, this is really the first time we've ever seen a British bank almost in open war with the central bank, the Bank of England. It's almost unprecedented and sets a very dangerous precedent. It appears that what Barclays had said so far is that they had a conversation with the deputy governor of the Bank of England, Paul Tucker, and he implied that Barclays may want to bring down their rates closer to that of their peers. Now, Diamond himself says, I didn't think he was telling me to do it, but my deputy did. So I sent my deputy an email about this with a simple FYI, and he got the idea that he had to bring down rates. And indeed, the next day after this memo, the rates did come down. So it leaves loads of unanswered questions for all sorts of people, and of course brings into question the judgment of Paul Tucker, the man that many people thought was going to be the successor to Mervyn King as the governor of the Bank of England.
Do you think heads will even roll at the bank then, Charlie?
Well, the reality is, I think, we have yet to discover whether the Bank of England has its own notes of this conversation. They may well have their fastidious note makers. And in that case, it could very well come down to a question of who do you believe, the Deputy Governor of the Bank of England or, frankly, the discredited Chief Executive of Barclays Bank. And I think in that situation, it may well be that people will trust the judgment of the Bank of England and that they will tend to emerge from this slightly stronger. Certainly it is very odd that that Bob Diamond said that he thought this was implied but not said, and then he went on to allow the rate to be brought down, apparently without any further internal discussion about it at all. So there are more unanswered questions, in my view, that remain for Bob Diamond than for the Bank of England still.
Charlie, you hinted at this already. As you say, it depends on who people believe. The problem right now, though, is that bankers in the UK aren't really the kind of people that the public want to trust. Do you think this has got ramifications for the wider UK banking industry, or is this just confined to Barclays?
Well, we need to see how far this went, but certainly the evidence is that there are lots of other investigations going on. And I think the reality is, because what these banks were effectively doing were fiddling the interest rates that all of us, you and I, rely on for our mortgages and our loans and everything else, it really does create the impression that the bankers are treating the financial system as their own personal toy. Because whatever happened in conversations between Paul Tucker and Bob Diamond, we know that separate to that, Barclays traders were forcing down the LIBOR rate simply to boost their profits that day. Now, that impression puts the bankers in a totally different planet to the rest of the community in Britain. And I think until there is a rethinking of the nature of that relationship, this is just going to run and run.
I mean, Charlie, there is, in their defence, I suppose, a bit of a view that actually the whole of the banking system was in a complete mess. Northern Rock had gone bust, and if they hadn't rigged this, they would have been in even more trouble. Is that a viable defence, do you think?
I'm not sure if it really makes sense statistically. The LIBOR rate during this period was much, much higher than it had ever been by multiples. And it appears that the changes that were being made as a result of these conversations, and particularly the changes made in order to help the profits of the proprietary traders at Barclays, were actually very minor. They're very small changes in LIBOR. I don't think any of that would really have affected the fundamental reality. People were going to realise there was no trust in the financial system. I think we got that point during the credit crunch, and whether there was a fraction of a percentage difference in LIBOR rate was pretty academic, I think.
Charlie, interesting thoughts as always. Many thanks indeed. That's Charlie Parker at Citywire. Just time, Stuart, to give you a few market numbers. Barclays, its share price has recovered a little bit. Let's not forget this bank has lost around 14% of its share price since that settlement over the LIBOR rigging scandal. Opening up today around about 0.2% up. No great shakes, but still a little bit in the green. Those are the numbers on the European markets for you there. A pretty flat opening, as you can see there. On the Asian markets, a better day's trade with the Nikkei extending those early gains we've seen during the week and a good start to July. Those are the closing numbers for you there. Just the Shanghai Composite in the red.
Okay, busy day business-wise, and we'll, of course, continue to follow those stories a little bit later on here on France 24, so stay tuned for those. Owen, thanks very much. More from Owen, of course, tomorrow morning in the business. Latest news from Claire after the break.